When I learned my parents gave the family business to my younger sister Emily, something inside me snapped. For 12 years, I had poured every ounce of energy into that company, 80-hour weeks, sleepless nights, holidays sacrificed, all for a future I thought would eventually be mine. Dad's words still sting. Emily's better with people. As if charm at cocktail parties outweighed years of sweat and sacrifice. Mom's voice followed, softer but cutting deeper. You can still help from behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. That's where they wanted to keep me, invisible, indispensable, but never worthy of the spotlight. A week later, when Dad called in a panic about losing our biggest client, I didn't rush to fix it like I always had. Instead, I said evenly, "Let Emily handle it. She's the heir, right?" And for the first time in years, I felt strangely free. I wasn't always bitter. For years, I believed that if I worked hard enough, my parents would see me as the natural successor to Matthew's construction. I started at 20, spending summers hauling lumber, sweeping job sites, and learning how a building rises from dust and steel. While my friends backpacked through Europe, I was pouring concrete under the July sun, proud to be part of something lasting. By the time I entered college, I knew construction wasn't just a job, it was in my blood. I studied engineering while working part-time and estimating, learning to calculate costs down to the last bolt. After graduation, Dad gave me a full-time role. Not glamorous, not managerial, just hours of spreadsheets and site visits. And I thrived. Over 12 years, I grew into operations manager, running projects worth millions. Every success felt like proof that I was building not just towers but my future place in the company. Emily, meanwhile, was in New York. She dabbled in marketing, floated between internships, then hopped from one boutique agency to another. She came home for Christmas, sometimes Thanksgiving, flashing photos of rooftop parties and glossy clients I'd never heard of. My parents clapped for her stories like she'd conquered Wall Street. I told myself it didn't matter after all. She wasn't here sweating alongside us. I was. The day of the boardroom meeting is burned into my memory. Dad sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, the signet ring on his hand gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Our longtime attorney, Richard, shuffled papers with that detached, calm lawyer's perfect. Mom hovered proudly at Emily's side, her hand resting on my sister's shoulder as if crowning her. "Official as of today," Dad announced, sliding the documents across the table. His voice carried the weight of finality, the kind of tone he used when closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Emily's smile was radiant, sympathetic, even as if she knew I'd just been cast as the supporting role in a play I'd spent 12 years rehearsing to lead. "You'll still be operations manager," Dad reassured me, as though tossing me a lifeline. "Your role is secure." Emily leaned forward, her voice dripping with practiced compassion. "I couldn't do this without you, Rachel. You know the technical side inside and out. Together, we'll be unstoppable." I stared at her, at the self-assurance in her hazel eyes, our father's eyes, and wondered if she truly believed she deserved this. Why Emily and not me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Silence fell. Richard suddenly found his briefcase fascinating. Mom's smile tightened. Dad cleared his throat. "Emily has the vision," he said finally. "She's better with people. Clients love her. You're brilliant with operations, but I'm not CEO material." I finished for him. He didn't deny it. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. 12 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and quiet faith collapsed into a single realization. To them, I was never meant to lead. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of whiskey, and my laptop balanced on my knees, staring at the glowing skyline of the city. In the distance, I could pick out several buildings. Matthew's construction had raised monuments to 12 years of my sweat and sacrifice. One tower in particular, the Harrington Project, glimmered like a reminder of everything I had poured myself into. I had stayed awake for 72 hours finalizing that bid, innovating a construction method that beat out competitors twice our size. Dad had been the face of the presentation, but I had been the engine. I thought about Emily. 10 months of experience, and suddenly she was the heir. I thought about Mom's voice. You can still help from behind the scenes. A supporting character. A shadow. And in that silence, a decision crystallized. If the company wasn't mine, then it didn't deserve every piece of me. If my sacrifice meant so little to my family, then maybe it was time to stop bleeding myself dry for their approval. The next morning, I set my alarm for 7:00 a.m. instead of 5:30. I walked into the office at 8:00 sharp, coffee in hand, 2 hours later than usual. Nancy, our receptionist who had been there longer than both Emily and I, blinked at me in surprise. "Everything okay, Rachel?" she asked. "Never better," I replied, smiling. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I breezed past her into my office, where the usual chaos waited. Voicemails marked urgent, a dozen unread emails, 2 project managers pacing nervously outside my door. Normally, I would have dived in head first, putting out fires, taking everyone's problems as my own. But not today. I listened, offered clear instructions, and sent them on their way in under 30 minutes. No hand-holding, no midnight follow-ups, just management. At noon, Emily appeared in my doorway. "Ready for lunch? We should talk through the transition." "Can't today," I said without looking up from my screen. "I've got plans." Her smile faltered. "I thought we agreed." "There's nothing to discuss," I cut in. "You're the heir, I'm operations, business as usual." For the first time, I saw her confidence waver. But I didn't let myself soften. That evening, at exactly 5:00 p.m., I shut down my computer, gathered my things, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. The freedom was intoxicating. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Within 2 weeks, whispers were spreading through the office. A bid miscalculated here, a delivery date promised there, numbers that didn't add up. At first, I ignored them. Not my department, not my problem. For once, I wasn't the safety net. Then came the Westridge project. We had been courting Westridge for 3 years, positioning ourselves to break into the healthcare construction market. It was the kind of contract that could define the next decade of the company. I was supposed to review the final numbers, but no one had officially scheduled it on my calendar. So, I didn't. By Friday, the bid went out. Monday morning, the news broke. We lost it to a competitor. The reason? A rookie mistake in the materials estimates something I would have caught in minutes. Dad stormed into my office, his face flushed. "What the hell is going on with you? We just lost Westridge." I sat calmly, folding my hands on the desk. "That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" His voice rose. "We've spent years chasing this contract. Emily needed your expertise and you didn't deliver." "She never asked," I replied evenly. "No one put it on my schedule. I work within my assigned hours, Dad, 8 to 5. If you want me to review something, it needs to be arranged in advance." His jaw tightened. "Since when do you clock out like an hourly employee? Since you made it clear the company doesn't belong to me. You can't expect me to work like an owner when I'll never be one." For a moment, he just stared at me, as if trying to reconcile the daughter who once bled for this company with the woman sitting across from him now. Then he muttered, "The company needs you, Rachel." "And I'm here," I said, "doing exactly what my role requires, no more, no less." The tension hung heavy between us. Eventually, he left without another word. But the problems didn't stop with Westridge. Emily had been charming clients with her easy smile and polished pitch, but she didn't understand the technical constraints that defined our timelines and budgets. She promised things we couldn't deliver. She rushed bids to look aggressive and competitive, not realizing the ripple effects on procurement, subcontractors, and labor. Within a month, 3 contracts collapsed. Clients grew wary. Subcontractors whispered about instability. Employees watched the Matthews family drama spill into boardrooms and hallways. For the first time, I saw fear in Emily's eyes. She stopped by my office more often, her voice less certain, her posture less confident. "Maybe we should talk through the Westridge issue," she said one afternoon, twisting her wedding band nervously. "There's nothing to talk about," I replied, not unkindly. "You're the heir. I'm just operations." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't be like this." "Like what?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Doing my job?" She had no answer. That evening, I shut down my computer at 5:00 p.m. sharp, gathered my bag, and walked past the project managers still buzzing with panic. For years, I would have stayed late, working until midnight to solve problems that weren't mine alone. Now, I let them linger. The guilt pricked at me, yes, but underneath it, there was a grim satisfaction. For once, my absence was visible. For once, they were forced to see what happened when I stopped carrying the weight of the entire company on my shoulders. And the truth was undeniable. Matthew's Construction was faltering, not because of me, but because of the sister they had chosen instead. The Harrington Group meeting was supposed to be a triumph for Emily. She had insisted on leading the pitch herself, telling Dad she could win over Thomas Harrington with her charisma and vision. I wasn't invited. That alone was unusual after all. I had spearheaded the Harrington Tower project from the ground up. But I didn't argue. If they wanted me behind the scenes, then behind the scenes I would stay. That Thursday morning I arrived at the office at 10 a.m., coffee in hand, fully expecting a quiet day. Instead, Nancy caught me as I walked in. "They've been in there an hour," she whispered, eyes wide. "It's not going well." I raised a brow. "The Harrington meeting?" She nodded. "Your dad looks ready to explode. Emily's struggling." Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let them dig their own graves. But another part, some stubborn piece of pride, couldn't stomach the idea of Matthew's Construction losing Harrington because of sloppy leadership. So, at 10:05, I pushed open the heavy glass doors to the conference room. The air was thick with tension. Thomas Harrington sat at the head of the table, his team arrayed beside him, brows furrowed over spreadsheets. Emily's smile was strained, her voice an octave too high as she stumbled through financial projections she clearly didn't understand. Dad's jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the table. "Sorry I'm late," I said, sliding into a seat with practiced calm. "Traffic." Every eye turned to me. Dad's glare could have frozen lava, but Thomas's face lit up. "Rachel," he said warmly. "Just the woman we need." "We were discussing the modular approach you pioneered on the tower project. Could you explain how it might apply here, with the new design modifications?" Emily's face fell. I could almost hear her thoughts. Of course he remembers Rachel. I took a breath, straightened my notes, and began. For the next hour, I walked them through strategies, cost-saving measures, and risk mitigation plans. I answered their questions with precision, drew diagrams on the whiteboard, and offered alternatives they hadn't considered. This was my element, not the politics, not the handshakes, but solving problems no one else could untangle. When I finished, Thomas leaned back, clearly impressed. "That's exactly the kind of expertise we've come to expect from Matthews. Rachel, you're the reason we trusted this company with our tower. And now, you've given me confidence we can move forward here." Dad exhaled in visible relief. Emily forced a tight smile, murmuring something about teamwork. But the message was clear. Matthew's Construction didn't hold Harrington's trust, I did. As the meeting adjourned, Thomas pulled me aside. "Your father mentioned Emily will be taking over as CEO." His tone was polite but edged with doubt. "That's the plan," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Interesting choice." His eyes sharpened. "For what it's worth, Rachel, Matthews won Harrington because of you, not anyone else. If you ever decide to make a change, give me a call." He handed me his card, crisp and weighty. "We're always looking for talent like yours." I slipped it into my pocket, my pulse steady but my mind racing. An invitation. A door. When I stepped back into the hallway, Dad was waiting. His expression was a mixture of anger and something else, fear. "You saved that meeting," he admitted grudgingly. "I did my job," I corrected, brushing past him. "Where were you for the first hour?" he snapped. "I told you," I replied coolly. "I'm available from 10 to 11. I had other commitments. What commitment could possibly be more important than Harrington? My life. The words dropped between us like a stone in still water. His face reddened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't wait for a response. Back at my desk, I pulled the business card from my pocket and turned it over in my fingers. Thomas Harrington's name gleamed in embossed silver. An offer, unspoken but unmistakable. For years, I had chained myself to Matthew's construction, convinced it was my destiny, my inheritance, my identity. And in return, they had chosen someone else. But now, for the first time, I saw a different future. One where I wasn't behind the scenes. One where my work wasn't taken for granted. One where I decided what I was worth. That night, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't review spreadsheets or draft emails. Instead, I placed Thomas's card on my nightstand and poured myself another drink. For once, I let the company's problems remain theirs, and it felt powerful. Dinner at my parents' house used to feel warm, familiar, a ritual of roasted chicken, Mom's laughter, and Dad's booming stories about contracts won. That night, it felt like walking into enemy territory. The dining room glowed with crystal and china, the table set as though for a holiday. Emily sat at one end, looking drawn and exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. Dad stood when I entered, forcing a polite smile. "Rachel," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." I shook it briefly and took my seat. Mom fussed with the wine glasses, filling the silence with small talk about her garden and the weather. But beneath it all, tension pulsed like a live wire. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the situation at Matthew's construction." I set down my fork. "What situation is that?" "You know damn well," he said, temper already straining. "We've lost 3 major contracts in 5 weeks. Harrington is reconsidering future projects. Subcontractors are nervous. The company your grandfather built, that I expanded with my own hands, is on the brink. We can't afford more mistakes." "And you think that's my fault?" I asked evenly. "I think you could help prevent it," he replied. Emily leaned forward, her voice small. "Rachel, I know I messed up. I'm in over my head, and I can admit that. But this is our family legacy. Please don't let it collapse because you're angry." Her words were softer than I'd expected, tinged with humility, but they came too late. "This isn't about anger," I said. "It's about value, about recognition." "We recognize your value," Dad insisted. "That's why we're here. We want you back fully committed." "On what terms?" I pressed. Dad glanced at Mom before answering. "Equal partnership. Co-CEOs. You handle operations and technical oversight. Emily handles clients and development. Equal ownership, 50-50. It was everything I had once dreamed of hearing. Yet sitting there, watching their desperate faces, I felt nothing but hollowness. "Why the sudden change of heart?" I asked. 6 weeks ago, Emily was the heir. You told me I wasn't CEO material. What's different now other than the company being in freefall?" Dad's jaw tightened. "I made a mistake in judgment. I underestimated how crucial your expertise is. I overestimated how quickly Emily could adapt. I was wrong." "Fine. Is that what you need to hear?" I shook my head. "What I needed was for you to see me before the crisis, to value 12 years of sacrifice before everything fell apart. Now it's too late." The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Mom reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Rachel, please. Don't throw this family away." I drew a steady breath, then reached into my jacket pocket. An envelope slid across the table, landing in front of my father. "What's this?" he asked, voice wary. "My formal resignation, effective 2 weeks from today." His face drained of color. "You can't mean—" "I do," I cut in. "I've accepted a position with Harrington Development, Chief Operations Officer, full authority, with an ownership track. So—" The words hit like a thunderclap. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Mom's eyes widened in shock. Dad stared at me, betrayal etched across his features. "You're leaving Matthews? For Harrington?" His voice cracked. "Our biggest competitor?" "I gave this company 12 years," I said quietly. 80-hour weeks, holidays, relationships sacrificed. And when the time came, you handed it to Emily. Now I'm making the best choice for my future." Emily's voice broke. "You're abandoning us." "Abandoning me." I looked at her fully, really seeing her the golden child, always the center, now drowning. For the first time, she seemed fragile, frightened. "You should have thought about that before you accepted a role you weren't ready for," I said softly. "Actions have consequences, Emily. Welcome to the real world." Dad shoved back from the table, anger flaring. "If you walk out now, don't expect to be welcomed back. You're choosing to become our competitor." "There's no undoing that." I rose, my hands steady on the back of the chair. "I'm not your enemy, Dad. I'm just not your safety net anymore. You made your choice. Now I've made mine." The air was thick with silence as I walked out. For years, I had dreamed of this table as the place I would one day inherit leadership. Instead, it was the place I cut ties, and strangely, as I stepped into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. My last 2 weeks at Matthews passed in a blur of whispers and cold shoulders. Dad barely spoke to me, communicating only through clipped emails. Emily oscillated between tearful pleas and icy silence. Mom busied herself with casseroles and polite small talk, as if food might plaster over cracks in a crumbling foundation. On my final day, Nancy organized a small farewell gathering. Colleagues I had mentored hugged me, thanked me, and wished me well. My family didn't come. Their absence stung, but it also clarified everything. Matthews Construction wasn't my home anymore. Harrington was. From the moment I stepped into Thomas Harrington's sleek glass office, I knew I had made the right choice. Within 6 months, I streamlined operations, implemented new cost-saving strategies, and boosted profits nearly 20%. My team respected me. My ideas carried weight. For the first time, I wasn't behind the scenes, I was at the center. Thomas praised me openly. "Rachel, you've exceeded every expectation. You're not just good at what you do, you're exceptional." Those words meant more than I could admit. Recognition, validation. Everything I had once craved from my parents, I now received from colleagues who saw me for my talent, not my last name. Meanwhile, rumors about Matthews trickled through the industry. Contracts lost, deadlines missed, subcontractors demanding payment up front, clients quietly shifting to competitors. Emily's charm was no substitute for competence. Then the call came. It was Nancy, her voice trembling. "Rachel, your father had a heart attack last night." The world seemed to tilt. "Is he?" "He's stable, but the doctors say it's stress-related. The company's falling apart, Rachel. 3 project managers have quit. Emily's drowning. People are terrified they'll lose their jobs." I pulled my car to the side of the road, staring blankly at the sunset bleeding across the sky. For a moment, I felt nothing but a cold, detached satisfaction. They had chosen Emily, and this was the result. But the satisfaction didn't last. Images flashed. Dad's booming laugh when I landed my first bid. Mom bringing late-night sandwiches to the office. Emily and I as kids, building sandcastles while Dad sketched blueprints in the sand. The company wasn't just theirs, it had been my life too. I had walked away to prove my worth, and I had succeeded beyond measure. But now the question loomed. Was I willing to let it all collapse? To watch 43 families lose their livelihoods, just because my own family had failed me? As Nancy's voice faded in my ear, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about choice. That night, I sat in my car outside the hospital, staring at the glow of fluorescent lights in the windows above. My phone felt heavy in my hand. Finally, I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Emily answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was small, raw. "Rachel, it's me. Nancy told me about Dad." A shaky breath. "He's stable, but the doctors say he needs to step back completely. And the company..." Her voice cracked. "We're going to lose the Miller contract next week unless we cut costs by 15%. Suppliers won't extend credit. I don't know what to do." 6 months ago, I would have savored her desperation. I would have felt vindicated. But listening to her now, all I felt was sadness. She wasn't the enemy. She was just someone handed a crown she was never trained to wear. "I'll come to the hospital," I said quietly. "We should talk. About coming back?" she whispered. "About options," I clarified. "For Dad. For the company. For everyone involved. I didn't promise anything. I didn't owe them that. What I owed myself was freedom, the freedom to choose, not out of guilt or desperation, but from strength. As I drove into the night, I realized something important. True freedom wasn't walking away and slamming the door behind me. It was knowing I could walk back through that door if I wanted to on my own terms. Maybe I would help. Maybe I wouldn't. But whatever happened next, it would be my decision. For the first time in 12 years, I was no longer behind the scenes. I was living on my own terms, and that was the real victory.